Distance was just a fact life where I grew up in rural Louisiana. You drove everywhere. 30 minutes was close. An hour was normal. That was just how things worked. Then I spent 4 years in Wuxi, a medium-sized city in eastern China. That assumption quietly fell apart because daily life there works on completely different foundations. The first thing I noticed wasn't anything dramatic. It was that I could walk to things. Back home, that's not really how life works. You get in a car, you drive, you park. That's the whole process. I didn't drive even once in 4 years. But within the first few days in Wuxi, I'd walk to a market, walk to eat, walk to meet someone. Not because I was trying to explore, just because that's how you got around. Sometimes while walking, I'd pass elderly people doing Tai Chi or square dancing in the parks and plazas. And that one small shift from driving everywhere to walking to things started changing how I experienced the city almost immediately. In China, everything is closer together. Buildings, shops, people, activity. In rural Louisiana, space is the baseline assumption. Distance is just the cost of living. But in Wuxi, space feels organized around walking instead of driving. I remember my morning commute to work. It was short enough to walk if I had the time. But most mornings, I just took a taxi because it was cheap and I could get there in minutes. Back home, that same distance would have meant getting in the car. Regardless, there's no other option. In Wuxi, I had a choice, and that choice felt completely normal after about a week. Everything starts to blend into one rhythm. Walking, errands, commuting, it all flows together. It doesn't feel like separate trips. It feels like one continuous movement through the city. That density also changes how public space feels. In America, there's always a level of awareness you carry around. Certain areas, certain times of night. You're aware of where you are and who's around. In Wuxi, that background noise just wasn't there. I could walk anywhere, at any hour, especially in the city center, which tends to be one of the safest parts, and not think twice about it. I never once felt unsafe or noticed any crime during my entire time there. The streets were active, people were out, and that constant level of caution I had grown up with simply didn't follow me there. And I think that's directly connected to how the city is built. More people, more activity, more eyes on the street at any given hour. In rural Louisiana, transport is simple. You drive. That's the whole system. In Wuxi, there are options. Buses, metro, bike share, taxis. But honestly, I gravitated toward what worked for me. The buses were available, but slow. The metro was still expanding and hadn't reached my area yet. Bikes aren't really my thing. So most of the time, if I couldn't walk somewhere, I used Didi, China's ride-hailing app. A taxi would show up in minutes and cost almost nothing compared to back home. But here's what struck me. Wuxi, a city most Americans have never heard of, has a metro system, a real one, still growing. Most American cities don't have that at all. That's not a small thing. It just quietly reframes what you think of as normal infrastructure. But Wuxi isn't just a self-contained city. It sits inside one of the most densely connected urban regions in the world. With an hour or two by high-speed rail, you can reach Shanghai, Nanjing, Hangzhou, major cities in their own right. And that changes the mental geography of the whole region. Wuxi stops feeling like a standalone place and starts feeling like part of something much larger. That's where the idea of distance itself starts to collapse. In rural Louisiana, distance shapes everything. You plan your day, your week, even your relationships around how far things are. 30 minutes is close. An hour is far. Anything beyond that is a major trip. But once you're connected into the high-speed rail network, that way of thinking about distance starts to break down. Cities that would normally feel distant become part of the same accessible region. I found myself taking trips that I would have never considered normal back home. Places that felt like separate destinations started to feel like parts of the same larger region. And what changed for me wasn't just travel time. It was the mental category of far. Weekend trips stopped feeling like events. Nearby cities stopped feeling separate. What counted as far quietly shifted without me noticing at first. One of the first real difficulties wasn't with infrastructure, it was with language. In China, you can't assume English will carry you through most daily situations. For the first couple of years, I was getting by on simple sentences and a lot of pointing. Basic transactions, basic directions, enough to function, not enough to really operate. But the harder part wasn't just speaking, it was reading. Everything around you is in Chinese. Signs, apps, menus, bank screens, everything. And early on, you're basically guessing your way through most of it. Even simple things like ordering food or setting up payments can turn into a small puzzle you gotta slowly work through every time. And speaking Chinese didn't come easily either. I could manage very basic conversations, but anything beyond that would fall apart quickly. There are long stretches where it felt like progress wasn't really happening. You study, you try, you practice, and most days it still feels like you're stuck at the same level. And then towards the end of my 4 years living in China, something clicked. Not gradually, just suddenly the language was there in a way it hadn't been before. And once that happened, China felt different, somehow. I felt that I was more a part of their society rather than being simply outside of it. Once you're inside China, you start to see how digital everything is. Setting it up wasn't easy. This was around 2018, and none of it was in English. The apps, the bank account setup, the verification steps, all in Chinese, at a time when I was still getting by on basic sentences. I couldn't have done it alone. It took a staff member from the school I was working at sitting down with me and walking me through the whole thing. But once I was in, the difficulties basically disappeared. Payments, transport, food delivery, everything ran through the same apps. It felt like you were suddenly plugged into a system that just worked very efficiently. It's different now. They've added English interfaces, Visa and MasterCard support. But back then, it was harder to get in. And over time, I started noticing how all these systems connect together. Like transportation, for example, the metro, the buses, the high-speed rail. They're not separate systems running alongside each other. They connect to each other. You can move from a local metro line onto a high-speed rail network without really thinking about it. The infrastructure is designed to flow in China. And that same logic runs through everything else. Density shapes transport. Transport reshapes distance. Language shapes adaptation. Digital systems reduce difficulties once you're inside them. Each system makes the next one work better. The density makes walking viable. Walking makes local transport feel natural. Local transport connects in regional transport. And digital systems tie it all together at the point of use. Everything reinforces everything else. That's what makes it all hold together. Not any single feature, but how everything compounds into something that just works. What makes it even more impressive is that I just wasn't seeing this in Tier 1 cities. I was seeing it in Wuxi, a Tier 2 city doing what it was built to do. And what matters is that this isn't Shanghai or Beijing. Those cities get all the attention in Western media, the skylines, the density, the spectacle. But they're not where most of China's middle class actually lives. Tier 2 cities like Wuxi are more affordable, less pressure, and built around everyday life. These are the cities where ordinary urban Chinese life actually plays out day to day. It's easy to miss this when Western coverage focuses almost entirely on the biggest cities. But the reality for most people in China is playing out in places like Wuxi. And that matters because it means what I was experiencing wasn't out of the ordinary. It was closer to the baseline, which changes how you interpret everything else in this video. The walkability, the transport, the digital systems in Wuxi are not an exception. They are just part of a regular city functioning the way it was built to function in China. Coming from rural Louisiana makes the contrast between car-dependent rural life and dense, walkable urban living much sharper than it might be for someone else, because the baseline assumptions about space, about movement, about what daily life requires are completely different. So living in Wuxi didn't just show me a different city. It showed me that daily life can be structured on entirely different foundations. Of course, it wasn't perfect. The air pollution was pretty bad when I first arrived, though it improved noticeably over the 4 years I lived in China. The streets themselves were generally clean, not spotless, but far better maintained than I expected for such a dense, active city. I've been back in Louisiana for a while now, but the difference between how daily life works here and what I saw it become in Wuxi is still fresh in my mind. Not because one system is better, but because you now know the assumptions you were living inside are not inevitabilities. It raises a question what else is possible, and who gets to decide what daily life can look like. And thank you so much everybody for watching this video. Don't forget to like this video and also subscribe to my channel. And also let me know in the comments, if you lived abroad, what felt completely normal there that still feels strange to you back home. And thanks again everybody for watching. I'll see all of you for next time.